Hello and welcome to part one of Northwest Newsweek Year in Review. I'm Riley McManus. The Omicron variant was surging around the region in January of 2022, especially in Bearskin Lake First Nation, where almost half of the population tested positive for COVID-19. Adam Riley had that story.
On December 29th, Bearskin Lake First Nation Chief Lefty Kamenawanaman declared a state of emergency in his community. At the time, there were 43 cases. Since then, the situation has spiraled out of control, with almost half of the population of 400 now infected.
We're almost at the breaking point. I think, people are exhausted, I guess, emotionally and physically.
There have been multiple requests for military support, including one from Ontario Solicitor General Sylvia Jones to assist the remaining 30 uninfected staff members as they support those in quarantine. Commander Waterman was helping do that himself, but was sidelined when his son tested positive on Monday. New Democrat MP Charlie Angus doesn't understand why the community is still waiting for help.
This is a community that has reached out to the federal government, asked for a week now to have the military come in with logistical support in order to keep people safe. This is a pretty straightforward request.
Earlier this week, Indigenous Services Minister Patty Hajdu confirmed close to $1 million in funding support to deal with the crisis in Bearskin Lake. Anishinaabe Nation Grand Chief Derek Fox calls the situation in his home community unprecedented and is urging the federal government to step up beyond what it has so far.
We acknowledge that the federal government has made funding commitments to Bearskin Lake. Crisis response in remote First Nations, however, is not measured in just dollars and cents. It's not just about submitting proposals and receiving funding. Once again, it's about having people on the ground to help.
While no military assistance has arrived, other communities across the Northwest have come to the aid of Bearskin Lake, with snowmobile convoys from nearby First Nations making 3-hour trips in -30 weather, delivering supplies. Fortunately, the outbreak has not proven fatal and no one has required a medevac out of the community. Adam Riley, TBT News.
A tragic fire that took the lives of 3 Sandy Lake children on January 14th led to calls for improved fire suppression services in First Nation communities. Kiiwetinoong MPP Sol Mamakwa says the higher levels of government need to address the lack of firefighting resources on reserves before more lives are lost. The early morning fire in Sandy Lake claimed the lives of Grant, Remy, and Wilfred Mikas, aged 9, 6, and 4, respectively. Mamakwa called on both Premier Ford and the federal government for more resources, saying the jurisdictional ping pong has left First Nations without the infrastructure to protect their people.
There's no standard on how we're going to provide service on reserve with respect to fire suppression, fire safety. We're talking about no firehouse, like fire trucks, fire equipment. We're talking about volunteers, firefighters, first responders, and where's the training?
According to the Ontario's Chief Coroner's Office, First Nation children aged 0 to 9 have a fire-related mortality rate that is 86 times higher than non-First Nations children. Students across Ontario returned to in-class learning on January 17th after the Omicron surge forced kids to switch to online school following the Christmas holidays. Adam Riley spoke with the 2 school board directors along the North Shore about the situation.
The first day back went actually better than we thought it would, so we're very happy about that.
The last 2 weeks have given both the public and Catholic school boards in the North Shore region the time needed to prepare for in-class learning in the Omicron era of the COVID-19 pandemic. It didn't, however, help with staffing issues due to being sick or isolating as a result of an exposure, according to Superior North Catholic Director of Education Maria Vazzanelli, who is also praising staff for their efforts over the last 2 years.
They have been at the top of their game through this crisis. With Omicron, I'm not sure when the peak is. I'm, hearing that it could be 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever. I think once we are over the peak, our staffing issues would stabilize.
Superior Greenstone's Nicole Morden-Cormier agrees with Vazzanelli, adding the school boards in the north were already short-staffed prior to COVID, and the virus and its insidious nature have further strained those staffing shortages. Thus, they have resorted to new strategies to mitigate the issue.
We have a process in place where we're able to collapse classes, bring them together in cohort situations. We have additional staff that we've brought into all of our schools where we've had that, where that staff has been available. And every evening and every morning, we're monitoring to see which of our staff are or are not able to attend work.
Fortunately, Morden Cormier says they haven't had to resort to those measures so far, and both boards are benefiting from a smaller student body in their schools, making social distancing much easier to achieve. She adds there will be many challenges ahead, but with the right strategy, they will be able to get through this.
Will it be perfect? Absolutely not. Will we be able to bring our students into the school every single day? That may not happen, but we're going to avoid that at all costs.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
In early February, the Conservative MP for Kenora said it was time for the truckers' protests in Ottawa to come to an end. Eric Malillo was in the nation's capital for his parliamentary duties and saw firsthand the disruption caused by the Freedom Convoy.
It's certainly not a decision for me to make, but I think it's definitely come the time that the protesters move on at this point.
The convoy passed through Malillo's riding on January 25th and 26th. At that time, he expressed support for their cause, saying he opposed vaccine mandates for transport drivers. The convoy participants then converged in Ottawa, and Malillo said he chatted with the protesters each day on his way to Parliament. But besides impending traffic in the capital, some people were seen disrespecting statues and monuments and honking their horns non-stop. Malillo criticized those actions on social media, and he began urging the truckers and others to pack up and leave Ottawa.
It's been almost a week, I think, at this point, and the protest, although it is peaceful from my experience, walking through this every day this week, it is peaceful, but it's clearly blocking critical infrastructure, and to me, that is an area where we don't want to see any protest block critical infrastructure, whether it's roads, in town, highways, bridges, railways, and obviously law enforcement has the tools and the duty to intervene if they feel necessary. So,
the landscape near the Manitoba border was noticeably changing in early February as preliminary work began on the 4-laning of Highway 17 between the border and the Kenora bypass. Crews were clearing the trees that once lined the highway in preparation for the next phase of the project, which involves landscaping and blasting rocks. The work area is a 5-kilometer stretch from the border to Gundy Road. The twinning of the highway near Kenora has been a pet project of MPP Greg Rickford for over a decade, dating back to when he was still the federal MP for the area. Rickford said he was excited to see roadway expansions that improve safety, and he remained adamant that the 4-laning near Kenora is the way to go.
But the twinning is the way we want to go out in northwestern Ontario. The Indigenous communities feel the same way, and so that's what we're focused on. The good news is that we're building out the highways in an appropriate manner for Northern Ontario. This is the only link across this entire country that is not served by a twin highway.
The work is being done by members of the First Nations located in and around the Kenora area, several of whom received funding from the province in 2021 to build capacity for a workforce. Members of the Dryden Police Service signed off for the final time in late February as the transition to the Ontario Provincial Police became a reality. It was a day of emotions, reflection, and tributes. Adam Riley reports.
The Dryden Police Service has proudly served the community since 1910, and we would like to thank the citizens for their support. For the final time, this is the Dryden Police Service signing off.
And with that, shortly after 6 o'clock Thursday morning, 112 years of municipal policing came to an end as the Dryden Police Service finished its watch over the residents of Dryden, and the Ontario Provincial Police took its first. The atmosphere was somber as memories were shared and captured by some of the officers who either just completed their last shift or came in to say goodbye and help decommission both the equipment and the headquarters. DPS Chief Ed Schwastik says while the service may be ending, that equipment will go on to assist partners within the region. The decision to have the Ontario Provincial Police take over due to increasing costs and crime rates was a contentious one, with some members of council fighting to the bitter end to save the local service. Deputy Mayor Michelle Price says the decision was not made lightly.
I was actually reading over what I had said when the decision was made, and I was in tears when I made that decision. But I know it's the best decision for our community. There was no other decision to be made.
Later that morning, a ceremonial coin exchange was made between OPP Chief Superintendent Brian McKillop and Shawostik. Several of DPS's officers will be joining the OPP in Dryden following some training in Orillia, while others are retiring or shifting to Treaty 3, Lac Seul, or Nishnawbe Police Services. McKillop says for all involved, Thursday was a big change.
What we have to acknowledge is a departure from a storied history, from an agency comprised of people and generations of officers that have really poured their heart and soul into this community, and that's not lost on us as part of the OPP.
Just prior to a special ceremony for officers and their families, sirens and cheers erupted as fellow first responders from the area drove past to salute the contributions of the DPS, and students from Open Roads Elementary School held up signs in support and formed a sort of honor guard for the officers and staff on their last march as a team. Shawosik says while he had only joined the DPS 3 months prior to disbandment, he still empathized with the officers that day and in that moment.
I can see through their eyes just the impact it has on their lives, on their professional lives, and also their personal lives. And it was definitely an emotional moment, and it was well done.
10-4, the Dryden Police Service is now 10-7.
Adam Riley, TBT News.
Coming up after the break, the rash of winter highway collisions in this region catches the attention of several Facebook groups and the OPP. Welcome back to Northwest Newsweek Year in Review. Images of transport trucks in the ditch or after collisions were being posted more and more on social media last winter. Several Facebook groups were highlighting those crashes, and the Northwest Region OPP definitely took notice. Jonathan Wilson reports.
Anyone surfing Facebook this winter has no doubt seen a lot of mishaps involving transport trucks around the region. It seems like almost every day, another rig has lost control and gone into a ditch, or worse yet, collided with another vehicle. Facebook groups ranging from NWO Roads to the more radical Skilled Truckers Canada and Highway 1117 Kills People have been encouraging people to post photos and video. And the OPP's regional traffic manager says she's well aware of those postings.
There is a lot of capturing of digitizing that we're experiencing now that we never had access to before. So certainly a lot of that is going on to social media. And I think that's a good thing. It gets a message out there that these are the things that are happening on our roadways and we need them to stop.
Some posters to those Facebook groups allege that the number of accidents involving transports has skyrocketed in recent years, and the situation is out of control. However, the OPP stats show in the Northwest region, collisions involving transports have gone up and down in the past 4 years. And while the percentage of collisions involving transports has been rising, Davidson thinks there's an even larger increase in people taking photos and video. And that's why it seems there are far more incidents occurring.
Everyone has a cell phone, so certainly there's a lot of photographs and uploads to social media. And of course, people are concerned. Commercial motor vehicles are large vehicles that are on our highways. And certainly when you see one in the ditch, it is a startling event. And I think that those are being uploaded to social media quite often. Not to say that there aren't collisions that are occurring, but certainly I think it's maybe been in the forefront of social media.
Davidson says they're also receiving a lot more dashcam videos showing unsafe passing, both by transports and by passenger vehicles. And she says those videos do help the OPP crack down on bad drivers on area highways.
I'm not sure if they're rising necessarily. What I think is that we are seeing more and more that certainly CMV companies or commercial motor vehicle companies are equipping their transport trucks with cameras. So we're getting footage now that we really never had available to us in investigations. And it can be very important to put back together what's actually occurred and really clarify what we're looking at as far as whether there was an offense committed or not.
Jonathan Wilson, TBT News.
The emergency department at Red Lake's Margaret Koshner Memorial Hospital was shut down for 24 hours in late March due to a lack of physicians. Hospital officials said the potential for a repeat incident there or at another hospital in the region was very real. Adam Riley had that story.
The fact that we have to make a decision to close an emergency department for an entire community who are not expecting it, they deserve better than that. This community deserves far better than that.
Chief of Staff Dr. Akila Wiley has been practicing at the Margaret Koshner Memorial Hospital in Red Lake for just less than 2 years. She says the decision to close the ER for 24 hours on March 26th due to a lack of physician coverage was disappointing, but also sees it as a chance to start a dialogue.
In making light of the whole situation, a lot of education is coming from it, opportunities like this to talk about it and inform our communities that, we really are in dire circumstances and we're starting to get very, very tired keeping our departments open.
The closure meant anyone in Red Lake or nearby Ear Falls would have to travel to Dryden, some 2.5 hours away, for emergency care, which did occur as 2 ambulances were dispatched from the base in Red Lake. The Kenora District Services Board confirms that with both their ambulances gone, the community was without paramedics for several hours. Sue LeBeau is the Chief Executive Officer for the hospital. She says a key problem is a discrepancy between the number of doctors dedicated to the community based upon its population versus the number of people who use the hospital and its emergency department.
So we are rated for 7. And that includes all the primary care that has to be done. I mentioned a while ago that we support about 6,000 residents, but what's not counted in there are the miners that fly in, fly out. For instance, there's a whole contingent as well that does that. Tourism is another one. When we see tourism ramp up again, our population can get significantly larger in the summer.
Red Lake's Chief Administrative Officer says following the announcement of the ER closure, the municipality declared a state of emergency to bring awareness to the situation.
This shouldn't happen in Red Lake, and it shouldn't happen in any other community. So we're very concerned, and we're looking for assurances that this does not happen in the future.
And while the crisis has subsided, hospital officials stress unless significant changes are made from a human resources perspective, another closure of the Red Lakes ER or another ER here in the Northwest will only be a matter of time. Adam Riley, TBT News.
Officials with the Ministry of Labor were on site at the Resolute Sawmill in Ignace, investigating a workplace fatality. The death occurred on March 28th and was reported to Ignace OPP. Sources said a woman employed by an outside contractor was crushed in the debarking area of the sawmill. Resolute sent a message to all the employees there, saying the death of a worker is the realization of their worst fears, and that it's cooperating fully with the Ministry of Labor. The company has also launched its own probe and says it's determined to get to the bottom of what happened and take corrective action across all their sites. The Ignace sawmill reopened in 2021 following a 2-year hiatus, but the operation was temporarily halted as a result of the death. Resolute CEO Remy Lalonde and other executives traveled to Ignace to support those affected by the tragic incident. Coming up after the break, the east-west tie transmission line is switched on for the first time. Welcome back to Northwest Newsweek Year in Review. The new East-West Tie Power Line project was electrified in April. Officials with NextBridge and the Ford government gathered in Wawa to formally announce the activation of the massive project. Lee Noonan had that story.
More than 1,200 towers were built between Wawa and Shunya, running parallel to the existing Hydro One line. The $777 million east-west tie is intended to increase electrical capacity along the corridor and create redundancy, allowing power to continue flowing through one line if the other is ever down. Minister of Northern Development Greg Rickford and Energy Minister Todd Smith both emphasized the role the new power line could play in attracting resource development projects to the area.
We're pleased to cut the ribbon on a energy infrastructure corridor that's going to do two things. One, provide solid energy infrastructure all along the corridor for communities, including and most notably Indigenous communities, but also be there for new industries in mining and forestry that we know are going to start up in the not too distant future.
The project was a collaboration with Indigenous partners, with the province estimating that up to 60% of the project's construction workforce was Indigenous. Jennifer Tidmarsh, project director with NextBridge, the company that owns and operates the transmission line, says that many of the workers employed on the project received training that they continue to use today.
And a lot of these people have gone on and made careers out of transmission line building. So there's quite a few projects that are happening, across Canada, and some of them have been moved to other projects. And some of them even have taken the skills that they learned on the East-West Tie and are getting jobs locally as well.
According to Tidmarsh, the project is built to withstand weather conditions on the North Shore and is expected to last 84 years. The cost to the province will be included in electricity bills throughout Ontario for the lifetime of the transmission line. Lee Noonan, TBT News.
Meanwhile, the Ontario and federal governments took another big step in April regarding the Highway 4 laning between Thunder Bay and Nipigon. Officials gathered near Dorian to announce a $107 million contract to twin another large section. Vasilios Bellos reports.
Kenora Rainy River MPP Greg Rickford made the announcement in Dorian about the $107 million project, which is expected to create 750 jobs. The construction, which is set to begin this year, has an expected completion date by 2026. Rickford was highly supportive of the project and explained how important the highway expansion will be to the region.
Northwestern Ontario in particular, it's high time that these roads were twinned. But Northwestern Ontario in particular is really one of the only sections left to twin. So I hope today is really about a legacy that moving forward within the next generation, if not sooner, the next decade, our highways are twinned.
Superior North MP Patty Haidu was also present for the announcement, as the federal government will be footing $30 million of the $107 million price tag. Haidu said the community has raised concerns to her regarding travel on Highway 1117 and that this project is addressing those issues.
So this is a very important project to increase the safety for people. Many people get health services on a regular basis in Thunder Bay. People go shopping. There's trade all along this corridor. So this is going to be a sigh of relief for many people.
Once the newly announced widening is completed, 72 of the 106 kilometers of Highway 1117 will be widened to 4 lanes. There is currently ongoing construction on other stretches, and while Rickford was unable to confirm which phase they are at, he was confident with the progress being made.
Having driven out here from Thunder Bay, things are well underway. We're standing beside a bridge that's under construction and a significant portion of twinning well underway. So we want to be ready for the next stage, and that's what today is about.
Both Minister Rickford and Minister Haidu stressed that collaboration between the provincial and federal governments is crucial in projects such as these that have a massive impact on safety for those in the region. Vasilios Bellos, TBT News.
And that will do it for this look back on the top stories around the region. Tune in next week for part 2 of Northwest Newsweek Year in Review.